Check, check, mic check, and we are rolling with another episode of Industry Interviews. I am your host and good buddy Dan Brown Jr., creative director and composer of the Emmy-nominated CrimeSonics. And today I am joined by the coolest dude ever, composer Michael Lord. What up, dude?
Hey, Dan.
How are you doing, my brother from another mother?
I'm doing pretty good.
Do you like that emotional switch from before we start to right after we hit record?
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, right? The lights come on for a song, drummer clicks it off. It's like go time.
This is true. Yes.
Man, I want to dig into all kinds of stuff that you're doing and everything, and like the new show that you're working on, shows that you worked on, and like I tell everybody on these podcasts, I do some cyber stalking on you guys right before we hop on here. And so I'm going through your bio, dude, and I see some interesting stuff in here I want to chat about. I don't want to jump too far ahead. So talk to me about working with bands and then working with Eric Valentine, because I have a connection with Eric. I want to talk.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well, Eric, there was a band that I was in. And Eric ended up producing the album.
I bet it sounds amazing.
It does. It is an amazing sounding album. So let me see. It was about, what was it, 1999? So it was a while ago.
Yeah.
I mean, we originally actually started working with Tebow and Burnett at some point, and that didn't quite flush out. And then the guy who had signed us is this kind of legendary A&R guy, this guy named Tom Zutaut, who is probably best known for having signed Guns N' Roses and Motley Crue.
Yeah, I haven't heard of those two bands. They must not be popular.
I mean, he signed Tesla. I think he also might have signed Enya. He signed some softer stuff as well. But
awesome.
Anyway, Tom had hooked us up with Eric, and we made the album. It eventually came out. It was originally going to be on Island Def Jam, but however it worked out, it ended up not coming out on that. It ended up coming out on a reboot of Rob Kahane's Trauma Records.
Yeah.
And Trauma was the original label that had Bush and No Doubt on it before he had sold it to Interscope, or however that business transacted. I assume he sold it. So, yeah. But yeah, it was a working with Eric was pretty awesome. We worked on analog tape, actually. We recorded it at what is now Henson, but it was the last day still of A&M recording. And we recorded everything to 2-inch.
Oh,
and Eric even got me in there and had me cutting some tape and doing some edits. And he was a Logic guy, and I learned a lot about editing. Because what he would do is he would eventually throw everything into Logic. He'd cut everything on analog, but then he would go throw it into Logic. And so I learned a lot about editing. I think Logic was maybe on 4.0 back then. So, but Eric's a great guy, and he makes great stuff. I have his 4-channel mic pre, which is absolutely fantastic.
Yeah, let's talk about that for a second. So, I don't know Eric, but I was in the market for a mic pre, and somehow came across this Undertone audio company, and I hit them up, and they're like, well, just come down to the studio, right?
Yeah.
So I ended up going down and hanging out. Really cool studio down in Hollywood. I can't really remember. It's kind of like off an alley. And here's this MPDI4. Is that what you have?
Yes.
Yeah, man. What a crazy. Here we are just plugging this guy's preamp. But dude, that preamp is crazy.
Yeah, I have it dedicated to drums because, I mean, Eric's a drum fanatic. That's where he came from. He came from being a drum. And eventually, at one point, Eric had a recording deal with a band called T-Ride, which was on Hollywood Records way back, and he convinced Hollywood Records to give him all of the money, and he went and bought a Neve console.
Very cool.
And built a studio, and they recorded their album in that studio. And then when the band didn't really happen or didn't go forward very far, he had his studio, and that was great.
Yeah, that is cool. To any and all who are listening, if you are looking for a really really interesting preamp that can be wildly transparent, but then full of color as well. You got to check out the MPDI 4. I don't know what they're going for now, dude, but when I bought it, it was not cheap. So I won't put any prices on here, but it's a pretty penny.
It's not inexpensive.
Yeah, it was pretty expensive when I bought it. Dude, let's back up. So are you an LA guy? Where are you from?
I'm from Los Angeles. I grew up in the San Fernando Valley.
What? That is rarer than it may seem at times. Where at in the San Fernando Valley? What town?
Granada Hills to start. And then by the time I was 15, 16, we were living in Sherman Oaks.
Oh, it's crazy, dude. So you've been out here this whole time. How are you so nice?
Well, I'm glad you think I'm nice.
You seem like a Midwest guy like myself. Right? Most people, I'm not trying to be rude, but a lot of people who are born and raised here, they're not as friendly.
Well, I mean, oh really? I find that the people who are born and raised here, we're all fairly relaxed. It seems like it, but who knows?
I'm coming from that small Midwestern town, so it's perspective, right? So born and raised LA guy, got into some bands. Talk to me about that, dude. So it looks like you got your start with doing the rock band thing, yeah?
Yeah, so there was, I went to Berklee College of Music for a bit, but I really kind of had entirely too much music theory in my life because I grew up playing classical piano.
Yeah.
And so I just kind of really wanted to get going. So, it dawned on me at some point that I'm in Boston, but I'm from Los Angeles, and it probably makes a lot of sense to get back to Los Angeles. So, gosh, at some point I met somebody who referred me to somebody, and there was a band that was looking for a keyboard player.
Yeah.
And, however it worked out, the band got a recording contract with Atlantic Records. A guy named Jason Flom signed it, and also Nick Ferrara, who's a pretty well-known entertainment attorney at this point. And so Jason and Nick signed the band, and that was 1991. And we had, I think a pretty nice success with it. And we spent a nice time opening up for larger bands like Bad Company and a band called Damn Yankees, which had featured Jack Blades and Tommy Shaw. Big Night Ranger. Nugent was in the band. I got a lot of Nugent stories.
I want to hear something.
So that was actually before the band that Tom Zutaut had signed. That was after that. And where I was being pulled between like doing television stuff and to be still doing the rock band thing. And I said, I'm not going to get another band. But then somebody approached me, and it was pretty evident it was really good, and it was kind of pretty far along, and it would get a record deal as well. So, but yeah, it was, it's so that's kind of where it started for me. But, to back up a little bit, I took drum lessons as a kid as well.
Huh.
And, we're starting like maybe around 5th grade. I started piano lessons when I was 5, but backing up, so in 5th grade, I started getting some drum lessons. And at some point I asked my drum teacher, I said to him, hey, do you know any kids my age I can start a band with? This is about probably 7th grade, 8th grade. Yeah, about that. No, actually, it was further into it. It was more like about 9th grade. It was 9th grade to 10th. It was 9th grade, 10th grade. I asked him that.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, man, there's this kid I've been teaching. So, give him a call. And I said, because I said, look, I love playing the drums, and I'm going to continue playing drums, but I want to play keyboards in the band. I don't want to play drums in the band. So that's why I was asking him, because I was looking for, maybe I could find a drummer first. So he goes, yeah, man, call this kid that I've been teaching. His name's Danny. So anyway, it ends up being Danny Lux. So Danny and I have known each other since, we were teenagers. And that was the first band that we had. Did not get a record deal, but we played the Troubadour and the Roxy and a place called the Country Club, which was out in Reseda. And we had a blast. And eventually Danny got a job working for Mike Post. And that led him to television. And then somehow when he started getting all of his own shows, he grabbed me and pulled me into the mix.
That's interesting. I did not know that connection. How cool is that?
Yeah, that's where it kind of basically starts for me. Is Danny ends up working his way up the mic post in the mic post world, and he ends up deciding that he has an opportunity to do a show completely on his own, so he takes it, and then he gets like 3 or 4 shows, and at that point in time, there weren't really music libraries, so you as a composer were going to pretty much be responsible for all of the music, which included source music. So, in addition to doing the underscore, it wasn't like, oh, we need a piece of cocktail piano or we need a little small jazz ensemble piece for this scene. The composer really had to take care of all that. So, that's what he started doing with me, saying, oh, hey, I need a little classical piece. I need this, I need that. And so I started chiming in and providing what was basically source music at the time for the shows he had, which were things like Party of Five, Dawson's Creek, Sliders, and Ally McBeal.
All the shows my wife watched as a kid.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, he had a good amount of shows. So so that's what kind of brought me into it, and that led me to just saying, like, once the album, the band that Tom Zutaut had signed, it was originally called Royal Sloan, but it ended up being called California in the end. And so when I was faced with there was a tour to open it for Stevie Nicks, or do just kind of dive way into television, and I just chose diving way into television instead. And so I did not. I guess I left the band and I did not participate in the tour opening up for Stevie, which ironically, the very first show opening up for Stevie Nicks was at Radio City Music Hall, and it was set for 13th of 2001.
Oh, wow.
So needless to say, that show never happened, as well as I think the first 10 days of that tour were canceled because of 9/11. So anyway.
Yeah. I'm curious, only because you alluded to it, I have to ask. You said you have some stories about the Nuge. I like the Nuge, man. Give me something about the Nuge.
Oh man, Dan, I'll just give you one that was interesting to me. The guy will, prior to putting his shirt on, make sure that his gun is in the back of his shorts.
That's ridiculous.
Stuff like, I don't know if it's an always thing, but I kind of noticed it.
How's his tone live?
Oh, I think the best thing Ted has going for him is he's actually a really great guitar player. And he is. He's a great rock guitar player. Yeah. And he shreds.
Yeah.
He's a good entertainer also. He's a really good entertainer. They had this thing there at the end where he would come running back out like he couldn't stop playing, and they'd go drag him, off the stage by his feet and all that, so.
Quick story for you. So back when High Enough came out.
Yeah.
And you remember the video, it's kind of crimey, right? And so there's this almost like a shootout going to happen, and Ted kicks out the door, lights are on, it's got the zebra print PR shredding out, glorious wah pedal. I don't know how old I was at that time, but I wasn't that old. And I tell you, it was one of that video and that imagery was like, I think I want to be a guitarist.
We were managed by the same people that co-managed Damn Yankees, and so that's how we ended up on that tour.
How many dates did you jam with those crazy guys?
We did. Well, it was Damn Yankees and Bad Company, and we did. I want to say probably 70. I mean, it's the entire summer. It started at the beginning of June and ended middle of September. So it was crisscrossing the U.S. a few times. Yeah.
I'm curious, too. So if we can just maybe move forward a little bit. Getting in with Danny Lux, since you're a teenager.
Right.
Brought on some of his shows before production music libraries really kind of existed. So how did you make, I don't want to say the switch, but how did you start working with production music libraries as well?
Well, let's see. So I got, I did a movie, I scored a movie for Ricky Schroeder.
So
And yeah, and so Ricky wrote it and he directed it and it ended up on Hallmark. It got some really good ratings for that. I think it was like the second biggest ratings thing that Hallmark Movie Channel had. So I did that, but it wasn't a lot of money to do the score. And I said, well, I want to own everything and I'll do a license in perpetuity. And to back up just a tiny bit from that, I had ended up releasing my own solo album and I ended up with the iTunes Single of the Week.
How cool is
that? That opened up a lot of licensing opportunities for songs. And I not only had my own songs, but I'd be producing songs for other people. And so I ended up with some pretty good music placements from that because, production music does include songs. Yeah. So the original footprint for me for production music would be placing songs, whether it be in something that's on network. I had things on Alias and Brothers and Sisters at some point, but also and What About Brian was another one. That was an ABC show. But also Laguna Beach, cable things. I had a bunch of stuff placed on Nickelodeon show, Zoe 101. So there was that part of it. But then as far as like the cues go, like instrumental stuff, what I did was I took my score for this movie called Our Wild Hearts, and I just decided to start cutting it up and repurposing it. And I know a great music supervisor named John Ernst. And John called me one day and he said, hey, I'm going to do this show and we need, some kind of country sounding stuff. He goes, do you have anything? I said, well, yeah, I'm taking all this stuff that I've done and I'm cutting it up and making, like 1.5 minute cues out of stuff or shorter, however it goes. And so, and that was the Our Wild Hearts score. So I started with that and it just ended up, I said, well, what's the show? And he goes, I don't know. He goes, it's something with these guys have a big like duck calling thing. They have a big duck calling business and they make duck calls. It's big, and they're down in Louisiana. And so at that point, we referred to it as Duckman Dynasty. And, but so it becomes Duck Dynasty. And that's kind of like the first real imprint that I had myself. With taking my own music and getting it into something that became successful, and then John had other shows he was music supervising, and we just kind of moved the cues around, and they ended up in a lot of different shows.
I was going to say we did an episode a few weeks back with a 2-time Emmy Award-winning composer Ron Comey, and I know he also has supplied a ton of music to Duck Dynasty. Yeah.
I mean, in the beginning, it was myself, John, and one other person that did most of whatever it is that the company, Gurney did that show. And so, I mean, they have some of their own library anyway, but it was, and then once it became a huge hit, then everybody, climbed on. And at that time I was doing other things and I wasn't really continuing to past season 3. I didn't contribute anything.
Can we back up to your song for a second? The iTunes
Yes.
song, the single of the week. So for one, I want to ask you, can we get a link to that so I can put it in the description?
Well, it's on iTunes still. It's a song called Smile. I'm pretty sure it's up on my website.
Did you tell me about that song? And you wrote it? Did you sing on it? I mean, tell me everything.
No, I just decided I was going to make my own album because I just had this idea that, there's what's his name? His first name's Greg, and now I'm forgetting his last name. but Greg had a group that he called the New Radicals, but it was just basically him. I mean, he had other people come and play on it because I know my friend played drums on it, but he had a big hit with "You Get What You Give,"
Yeah.
but he never really wanted to pursue, I don't think, the idea of being an artist. It was just like, hey, look, I can record my stuff and I can make it sound really, really good. And that was kind of like, well, I'm going to have to do that myself. And I've been putting together a studio, and so that was really kind of like my goal to make something that sounded great and to put it out there. However, I made myself aware to Apple. I did it, and I was able to get it to the guy who was part of the decision-making process. And it was interesting because at first I was just rejected. And then suddenly I got a phone message on a Monday night that, hey, I didn't even know, actually. It was already up by the time I found out about it.
Yeah.
So yeah, originally my contact into the person said, yeah, I talked to him, but he said he didn't think so, no. And then 2 weeks later, there it was. So, and that helped out a lot, because not only did I get the placements, but I also ended up, a good friend of mine was like, hey, we're going to put together the cast album for American Idol. Do you want to work on that? And he goes, if you want to work on that, I'll just give this Desmond Child, your name, and he'll give you a ring, and you'll be all set up. So I was like, yeah, sure, cool. So a few hours later, they call me, and they just say, here are the songs you're going to do. And I said, you just get the tracks going, and when you're done, like, give them to him, and then Desmond's going to cut the singers at his place, which is on Sunset Plaza. So that there were a lot of things that happened from showing that, hey, I can make something that sounds great, and here I can produce tracks, and I can engineer them and mix them, and so on and so forth. So yeah,
Desmond's he's written a couple of songs, huh?
Yeah. He's a cool guy also.
Yeah, he knows a little bit about something.
Yeah.
So I'm curious. So over 200 shows now you've supplied music to, probably even more than that, right?
Right. Well, that happens from my partnership with John Ernst. He's got his hands in a lot of things. So yeah. So, and then a couple other music supervisors as well. But plus, I have a library now, and I'm delivering it to different entities that all are pulling from some big pool of music for their shows that editors have access to. So that's a pretty key thing.
Yeah, the sub-publishing, and that's that's part of our business that I don't think many people understand. And so maybe we can act like I don't know anything, and you can explain to me a little bit about what that means exactly. So you have a library, and you're saying that people can pull. Like, how does that all work?
Well, you deliver them the music, however you deliver them the music, and I assume it's sitting in a bin someplace, and everybody can pull from it. The one thing is, editors are super, super important. I think there's a lot of focus on like music supervisors, producers, and they are important, but people who are editing, sitting right there, that have the ability to grab something and put it in there, they're really, really valuable. Editors are super, super valuable.
No, keep going. Sorry.
No, I was going to say they're super valuable. There's a lot of stuff that I gave to somebody who was editing, and that resulted in, at least 10 shows, maybe more than that. But I'll stick on the conservative side.
Sure. And I'm just curious, like, what that means exactly. So I'm pretending I just moved to LA. I got 30 cues. Is my goal now, let me get out there and hunt down, make some friends with some editors working on some shows, get them my hard drive, or set up a box or a Dropbox for them. And then
I think it's meeting anybody who's part of the process that can help put your music into something.
Yeah. Yeah. That's
That, I mean, and again, you know, I mean, obviously music supervisors are you know, like, I mean, you know, I met you at the production music conference.
yeah.
Most of the stuff that I heard was, you know, music supervisors looking for things. And so all I'm saying is that they're just editors and bays that are editing things, and they have access to music. So however you get, I mean, I've done it. I've walked over to the production company and handed it to the editor.
Yeah.
And they put it into the system. I've also delivered it via, you know, saying, okay, here's a zip file we transfer, and, you know, and then they put it into their system, and I don't really see them do it, but, you know, it ends up in there. So, you know, so anyway, the editor thing, I think, is an important thing for sure.
Yeah.
A lot of times, and even for songs, you know, because a lot of times they'll just be wanting to even hold it for temp. You know, we're just got to put something in here, but we'll replace it later. But once people keep listening to it, you know, it starts to stick. And then there you go. So I know that the piece that they're using for the theme for AGT was just a library piece. And it got in there, and it just kind of stuck, and it stuck, and it stuck, and it stuck. It wasn't a piece of music that was originally written for the show. So, and I don't know if, you know, if there's an editor that stuck it in there or how it happened, but it's just important to have your music in the mix in all the ways that you can.
Yeah. And let's talk about
editors actually will walk around with their own drive music, because they know they know the music, and they'll be like, oh, I could put this in here, I could put that in that scene. So, you know, editors will walk around with their own hard drive of music.
I'm interested to know how this fancy new show you've been working on, The Wall, came about.
Well, The Wall, I worked on with the guy who created the show, and I met Andrew. Oh man, I don't know, 8-9 years ago, maybe, at a hockey game. And he was doing a show that was on CMT at the time called, what show did he create?
CMT as in country music?
Right, yeah. It's called Sweet Home Alabama. Yeah, Sweet Home Alabama. Yeah, Sweet Home Alabama. Is it Sweet Home Alabama? Yeah. Yeah, Sweet Home Alabama is what it was. And it's basically kind of it was a bachelorette sort of show.
Yeah.
And I had a song that I had produced for somebody, and it was used as like the final scene with the final kiss where she picked, you know, the dude. And so he had kind of, I guess, basically a rap party that was at Staples Center, and he's a hockey fan, and I was invited, and, you know, that's where I met him. And then I said, I have a music library. And he goes, yeah, get it to me. So, you know, he had a few shows that were happening on CMT at the time, just smaller cable things. And I ended up doing some custom stuff for him, but then also giving him my library and him using it in some things. And then at some point, he had The Wall beginning to happen, and he reached out and he told me that he wanted me to compose the themes and all that for it. And I said, well, I'd never done it. I'd never done a game show. And he said, yeah, well, that's exactly why I want you to do it. Because I don't want it to sound like a game show. It's like, okay. And so, yeah, I went over and met with him, and he told me what the concept was and what he wanted. And I was a bit like, you know, perplexed by it. He was like, well, so you want big, epic orchestral music for a game show? And then, but, you know, he explained it to me. He's like, oh, okay, now I get it. It makes sense, because, you know, they have a backstory section where you get introduced to the contestants. So it's a little bit more involved than like the half-hour format where, you know, you're just like, here are their contestants, and Bob's a teacher, and, you know, wherever Bob's a teacher, and Karen, she's, you know, they go and do a whole thing like you would see on American Idol, where they do a whole backstory. of the contestants. So anyway, that's how that came about. I had a song placement on one of his shows, and I just happened to mention that. Then I mentioned I have a library, and he's a really open and receptive guy. And so, or at least in that moment, so I got that opportunity to do that show.
Big sweeping orchestra music. Tell me about that process. Writing in the DAW, pen to paper, recording with the real orchestra, only using samples or hybrid.
Yeah, well, there's no budget for an orchestra. He actually asked me to put together a budget for an orchestra. Yeah. And when I did it, it was like, no.
Yeah.
Because it's not only just the original recording session, but then you've got to pay every time, I forget the cycle, but there are repayments that go to everybody as well. Yeah. So it becomes quite expensive for the network. For the thing that I think is considered to be the theme of the show, I sat down just basically at a piano and I wrote out a theme, and then it was just like, how do I, and then I got to orchestrate it. So it was kind of old school in that. As far as pen to paper, the most I'm going to get into is writing some chord symbols and a treble clef with a melody.
Yeah.
So like a lead sheet of it, because I don't really need to write out exact. I wasn't going to record it as a piano part anyway, so it was just chord symbols and a treble clef, and obviously documenting it with a voice memo. And then I sat down and just created something that sounded. I was given a couple examples of big epic superhero movies. And so I was like, okay, well, it's going to be huge brass and huge strings and big percussion.
Back up for a second. You say documenting it with a voice memo. What do you mean?
Yeah. Well, just, in your iPhone. Just recording the little piano thing so you make sure you don't forget it or whatever it is.
It's crazy. You've said a couple things. Like, you and I are really similar dudes because I also started on drums. I got a photo of you up on my website. We both play on Wolfgangs, right?
Oh, yeah. Right.
I do about the same amount of pen to paper as you do. And I religiously, daily document things with my iPhone.
Yeah. Well, no, I do sometimes really actually start writing out parts because it's just easier for me to see and to look at than to try to keep it straight in my brain. But as far as composing is interesting because there's the idea of actually composing a piece of music, which can take, a half hour, but then trying to produce that piece of music, which we're all expected to do, that's the super time consuming thing. And then again, there are some things that are really straightforward. Obviously, the chord changes in a melody, but there's a lot of stuff that isn't really documentable anyway, because it's like drones and weird sounds and like how are you going to put that to a treble or bass clef or viola clef or whatever. There are no clefs that are going to really get that idea across anyway. So
you're right on the money with the production time, the producing time versus the writing time. When I used to work for Disney and I was hired to not copy by no means, but sound similar to people that you would know, and you can get the ideas out so quick, but then to realize those ideas in the DAW and make the samples sound believable. I mean,
I spent an hour and a half trying to just being like, basically like frustrated with the staccatos not being staccato enough.
Yeah.
The things that or not having the right texture that I want. And, and like I said, the things I was listening to that were held out as examples were big, epic, orchestral, major motion picture things. Yeah. So they had actual orchestras. So there is a little bit of that, I can't get it to quite be like that.
Yeah.
But eventually find the right sound. And now, I've started assembling that stuff in 2015. The show didn't debut until December of 2016. The wall did. And so, but I was putting that stuff together in 2015. And back then, I think the biggest thing, the big breakthrough for me was I purchased the mural strings by Spitfire.
Yeah, I was just going to ask you. Let's talk a little bit about the samples that you're using.
And that was a big deal to it's like, oh yeah, these strings sound epic and sound great. This is what I love these. That was a big part of it. It wasn't the only thing. I mean, I think I remember caving in and doing the East-West Hollywood strings, and I think, or actually the Hollywood Orchestra, because I remember digging into the brass. There was some brass in there that I used, and I think that I used the. I think that's where I finally found the staccato strings that I liked the most. But the legato strings on, or the sustained sort of strings on the mural were really, really fantastic. So, especially for the big sweeping stuff. And there's a decent amount of 8DO stuff in there as well. So,
yeah. I'm curious too. Have you tried? I know Spitfire's come out with so many string libraries since then. They have some of the chamber ones. Have you tried those? Like, is it called like Sakani chamber strings or the tight strings?
Yeah, I mean, I have pretty much all the stuff they do. I haven't really delved into them that much. Yeah. Probably more for something that was specific, and I felt like, oh, okay, let me try that. I do think that really the sample libraries excel best in the bigger stuff.
Yeah,
I think they're almost made for that. I mean, the more intimate anything gets, I think the more effort you got to put into making it sound realistic, which means, you know, all the MIDI CC stuff and digging into that for sure. Another library that is fantastic is the orchestral tool stuff.
Yeah, so you're right on
all the ARC series. That was something that at the very end, I ended up using within the ARC 1 had come out by then, and I used that within the wall for sure. Yeah.
Orchestra tools. I have I think all of their brass and woodwinds, and again, not inexpensive by no means, but worth the money. That is some really good sounding stuff.
Yeah, the stuff I've been working on. I've worked on some things recently. I've actually started using the Berlin woodwinds, which are pretty nice. I mean, that's orchestral tools. So yeah, I mean, those are Cine samples. There's lots. I mean, you know, it's pretty much the usual suspects. Nothing that is necessarily really obscure.
Yeah, so. That's so cool. And I know I had mentioned I used the orchestra tools for woodwinds, but what were you using for woodwinds?
Not a lot of woodwind stuff going on, honestly. So I think probably Hollywood Winds, which is a Cine library.
Yeah, very cool. Dude, tell me about your studio, man. So we met at PMC, right? I remember taking you to the crib one time, briefly, right?
Yeah. Well, it's kind of a smaller room. It's just like 12 by 20. Yeah. And cram everything into it. It's at my home, but it's separate from the home. And then, but recently I added on and I built basically what's a drum room and an amp room, so I can have all that stuff separate. So I can have drums set up live and mic'd and ready to go, and I don't have to be in the same room with an amplifier anymore, which is fantastic. Yeah. You know, but then again, a lot of times I think, I mean, half the times I'm recording actual amps, and then half the time I'm using the Kemper, which is just a fantastic piece of gear. I love the Kemper.
Yeah, I'm usually really fast to adapt to technologies, and for some reason, something about this Kemper, I just can't get into it. So sell me on this thing. Why do I need this Kemper?
Well, the thing for me with the Kemper, I mean, is that I'm not trying to go and model my amps or do that kind of thing. You know, I'm just, you know, buying some presets that are made by the modeling presets that are made by others. But the thing is about the Kemper for me is that if I was using something like Guitar Rig or what's the other one? Amplitude.
Yeah.
And I kind of favor Amplitude over Guitar Rig.
Yeah.
But there's just all this non-committal stuff because you're going with a direct sound, and it's like, well, I could change it. I'm not locked into that sound. There was something about, wow, I'm just recording audio, and that's going to be the audio, and I can dial in the sound and have. And I can hear it, and it's great, and it's in stereo, and you got the reverb and the delay, and it's printed, and it's all there, and there's so much of everything that's just exists virtually that when I got the Kemper and it just sounded fantastic, I was like, I can totally commit on this, and it's also great to just be able to pull up that same preset again if you want to use it on something else or you need to make a fix on something. So I think it's just the idea of like I'm committing to a sound a lot, and I feel confident that Kemper has given me a great sound. So
okay, help me understand. In the studio next to me, I got several Marshall heads, Fender amps, tons of killer mics, killer preamps, and I have only ever really recorded real guitars for really my entire life. If I plug into this Kemper, am I going to feel like I'm still playing on an amp? Is it still going to give me that movement of air that I'm used to?
I don't know. I mean, that's all kind of a personal thing, honestly.
I got to try
it. You just have to do it. But what I do know is that it's just highly, highly thought of. I don't know of anybody that isn't just like, wow, this is great. It is definitely different playing into an amp or out of an amp or however you want to think about it. But I think it just kind of depends on what you're doing also. I mean, the thing is that music, as it's produced, ends up starting to have its own sound. And so these things have been around long enough that we all have experienced listening to music that's been created with this stuff. So a lot of times we're listening to things, and probably a lot of things that we enjoy, and they weren't created using live amps. They're created using, something like the Axe or the Axe effects or the Kemper or something like that. It's almost the same thing with this is like the big argument that people have over being super traditional versus not being traditional. I actually watched not all of it yet, but I watched that masterclass thing from Danny Elfman.
I want to watch that. I haven't yet.
And I think I've watched the first 5 or 6 episodes. But one of the things that he talks about is like, he is the recording is recording because there's certain things that you just can't get the sound of with doing a traditional orchestra. And he commented on how he will go in and he will fortify the recording, especially with pizzicatos, with sample library stuff, because there's just no way to get them to sit above the orchestra or to have them have the impact that this of the sonic quality that needs to be had. And so that's what we're all kind of dealing with. We're dealing with a world of recorded music. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about a rock song, a pop song, a hip hop song. I mean, none of it's natural anymore. It's not an 808 anymore that just is out of the box. Somebody's got to put it through a lot of processing, and now that has become a sound. So even the orchestra has gone through a lot of that. And you have, like, the other thing that Danny Elfman said is record your percussion separate, because you're just not going to, you're not going to be able, if you have everything in the same room, it's going to compete against the other instruments. So if you have a budget and you can, go and record all that big percussion separately. It's going to come out a lot better. So this is all stuff that definitely wasn't going on during the days I would imagine John Williams doing Jaws and Raiders of the Lost Ark and Star Wars and all that stuff. So the sonically, music has changed a lot. You know, and speaking of guitars, I mean, you know, people layering the guitars. So, you know, I mean, people doubling and tripling and spreading stereo. I mean, these are all like, there comes a point where the sonic quality of music becomes familiar and people kind of expect it. And then like, well, how do you create that? And so even Danny Elfman is turning to having to supplement pizzicato strings on bigger things with sample stuff, because that's how he's going to get it to sit right. They're going to get it to sit right in the mix. So, I mean, there are all sorts of things like people cutting the brass section separately. And then even, you know, mixing in brass samples with that. And so you start hearing that in enough blockbuster movies, and now you two are chasing that sonic thing the same way you're trying to chase Eddie Van Halen's tone from 1978 Van Halen 1. So it's all that's something that we're all kind of, you know, dealing with, I think, because again, to get back to the composing is composing, but it's also you're responsible for production these days as well.
We talked about chasing Eddie Van Halen's tone.
Right.
I have an original.
I've got a great temper patch for you.
Listen. I have a absolutely museum quality in the box 1974 MXR Phase 90, the real deal.
Yeah.
No reissue, like the real stuff. And I don't know, man. That Kemper thing, it intrigues me because I'm such the purist guy.
Yeah, well,
you know what I mean?
You're not, because look at all the things that you do. You know? I mean, there's so many things that you do that already kind of, you know, are not. I mean, you know, you have your sample libraries yourself, and you're using. I always looked at it like this: when Pink Floyd was making their music, they were pushing the envelope, and yet now they're considered probably being more organic or more, you know, traditional. But they were trying everything that they could, anything that was new, from the synthesizers to, you know, all the guitar pedals to different ways of recording. They were doing everything they could to mess with things. So now we're just that much further along. I mean, same thing with Kraftwerk. You know, they're just, it's just, they're going through lots of processing and trying to figure out new ways of making sound. So, and it's always cool to be more organic or traditional, but you know, there's nothing wrong with embracing all those things that even back, like I said, you know, Pink Floyd was pushing it. You know, they in their day to find their sound. So
on your website, you have a lot of really nice photos of your studio.
Yeah,
and you know, I see cool pedals here and there. I see some cool instruments here and there. What do you have anything super unique or interesting? I only ask because I'm such the collector.
Well, I love my Wurlitzer. My grandma gave it to me. I mean, she passed away a few years ago, but it was her Wurlitzer.
Wow.
And her and the guy who she was married to wasn't really my grandfather, but they had a band and they would play in San Diego. My first gig I ever played was they let me sit in and play drums. Their gig was at the Hotel Del Coronado in the Grand Ballroom there.
Yeah, very cool.
I played Proud Mary with them. So she gave me the Wurlitzer, and it's 65, 66, I believe. And then there was also the super reverb, the deluxe reverb that came with it. I got a deluxe reverb same year, as well as a Fender Twin. So they're all like 65, 66.
Oh, that's so cool.
And then there was a Les Paul also that I basically got their gear. A Les Paul 20th anniversary Les Paul Black Beauty.
Oh, man.
So those are kind of cool. I was given a 1952 Martin by a television director / producer at some point, a 0021. That's kind of nice. Yeah. I like that. I like this log drum I have. Kind of neat. And I just got a tongue drum. I mean, that's kind of new. I just got it over Christmas. So I'm with you. Like, also, like, there's even a process of being natural where, hey, maybe I'm going to try to, play the actual instrument instead of going for the samples. But it just depends on how much time you have and what's going on and all of that. Trying to think, like, if there's, I have an awesome Yamaha C7. That's a good thing. So, and when I have the time, I can mic that up and it sounds great. But the thing is about that is that it is going to sound like a Yamaha C7. Yeah. So that's not really the sound of a scoring piano. So there's that whole thing as well. Because like I said, as sonic qualities take on, you hear cues and you hear music made by others, and it's treated in a certain way, it becomes something that's sought after. So I'm not going to be able to get that super compressed off the soundboard, delicate sort of thing that, that Thomas Newman may be able to get, while he's sitting in, the $1 million studio, with the time to get that. I think that he's the guy that kind of really got that subtle piano thing to come to the forefront with Shawshank Redemption and to a certain extent maybe American Beauty, but definitely with Shawshank.
Shawshank the other day, actually, again. Yeah. I tell you what, man, like it's pretty remarkable. The score is pretty remarkable.
So I think that if you're gonna be totally traditional, you're gonna lock yourself out of a lot of opportunities, because a lot of stuff doesn't require things to be traditional. It requires the exact opposite of that. So there is an embracing of just letting it all go and realizing that John Bonham's drum kit doesn't sound like a natural drum kit. It's heavily processed.
In a gymnasium.
or wherever it was.
So we're getting close to the hour mark, and I like to try to keep these combos around 1 hour. And okay. I would be so remiss if I didn't ask you a couple things real quick. I'm just thinking about younger Michael, younger Dan Brown Jr. You were here. I moved to LA, but people who are thinking about, maybe I want to work in music for media. What kind of advice you could give them, career advice or things they could consider if they were right there at the onset? What would you say to that up and comer?
Let's see. You're going to have your sounds together. You're going to have to be able to produce music and make it sound really, really great, whatever that means. So you're going to have to make that investment, however that investment is. And it could be something as simple as if you play acoustic guitar and you want to do some, there's a lot of great acoustic guitar cues out there in the production world where that's all it is. But you got to have really great quality. It's super important. Really educate yourself on the technology part of it. Understand how to tag metadata. Get organized. Make sure you're really organized. There's a big business aspect and organizational aspect to everything. It's going to benefit you to be in some kind of center geographically that has a lot going on. So I don't know if that necessarily means Los Angeles, but Los Angeles probably certainly has the most of it going on. So probably for some people, they're going to have to move. Yeah. A lot of everything goes to relationships. And so, I was in the right time and place taking drum lessons from the right person, which really, and that drum teacher, he was a recommendation from somebody that my mom knew from preschool, from when I went to preschool. So, meeting the right people. I would imagine things would be different if I didn't end up in a band with Danny when I was, 15, 16 years old. another thing that helped me was, just taking gigs, not overthinking it. Taking gigs, because some of the stuff that got glossed over was I got opportunities just to teach. Like somebody would say to me, like, "Hey, do you do any teaching?" And I was like, "Yeah, I can teach." And I made some really great connections on that. There was the composer named John Nordstrom who wanted me to teach his daughter, and so I did. But John also ended up composing the score for One Tree Hill. And then one day he just asked me, "Hey, do you want to do?" He asked me to play on things for him, but he goes, "Hey, man, I got another show. Can you start composing some cues for One Tree Hill?" I was like, "Sure." So, really putting yourself out there and not overthinking things and doing the work. So,
yeah. Don't overthink and keep your head down, do the work. Meet good people and be good people, right? We talk a lot about this on the podcast, which is you got to be a good hangman. Got to be a good hangman.
Right. But also you got to somehow, I think it comes down to finding your peers.
Yeah.
It's not, that's what it ends up being. And that's the tough thing, is finding your peers that all kind of come up together. So that's like I know Sid, who composes This Is Us, his relationship with the guy who, Dan Fogelman is his name, I believe, who created This Is Us, they were roommates in college. So there's a lot of that stuff going on. So I think school can be a really good thing for people. And I think that getting yourself involved in like an internship at a bigger place where you can meet people can be really important. But, ultimately everybody has their own, I guess, secret sauce, or maybe not so secret, but some sort of sauce that goes together into making them whatever they are. And at some point you got to take a leap of faith also and try to go for it on your own. I've written some stuff for some libraries, but then at some point it's like, I got to go try to make this work on my own. And you got to figure out if that's for you or not. So, so yeah,
I love it.
Earth-shattering advice, but
but it's real talk, man. # real advice, right? You got to want it, and you got to go get it.
Yeah, and it's all pretty consuming. Like, just always trying to keep up with the what's coming out with libraries and just trying to improve. Look, I'm sitting there watching the Danny Elfman masterclass. You don't ever get to the point where you're not trying to learn, or you think that you know so much that you don't have to that you shouldn't. I already know that stuff. Why would I watch that? I'm already a composer. I don't need to watch his masterclass. So picking up new instruments and learning those all the time. You have to be driven and really engaged and definitely love the musical process. Yeah. Don't take things too personally either,
Because you will hear no's, you will get revision notes. Sometimes you don't nail it. It's true. It's okay. Right.
Right. And sometimes the advice you're being given is bad advice also, and but it's their show. If they want to ruin it, they ruin it. Yeah. There's also like, I think that it's kind of like a piece of music. A lot of times you got to let it go to where it wants to go instead of trying to force it to be something else. And there are a lot of people that have, that have their idea of what they want to do, and no matter what industry you're in. And one of the things that I got from, I attended a little production music conference lecture up at the Film Institute. So by the way, these are great things that happen in Los Angeles, where you have an opportunity to listen to people or maybe try to network or whatever it might be. But one of the things that was said was like, hey, you know, like whether you know it or not, a lot of these big like film guys, they're doing production stuff also. You know, they may not advertise, they may not know it. So, you know, embrace all the musical processes. And so that's what I'm saying. Like, if your life leads you to game shows, like it kind of has for me for the moment, then do it. Go for it. You know, not like, well, I need to be doing scripted television, or music's only important if you're composing the picture. It's like, well, most of Martin Scorsese movies are needle drops. They don't have a composer. I mean, there have been. I think Bernard Herrmann did Taxi Driver or something like that. But a lot of them are, and same thing with Tarantino. It's not until recently he kind of engaged, you know, an actual composer. So, you know, there's so many great moments in music and that even in the scripted world that is just using other music that already exists. So, you know, there shouldn't be an idea of hierarchy of like being one kind of composer is better than being another kind of composer. You know, to me, one thing about the game show thing is that one thing that I really wanted to do is to try to create a piece of music that will last, that gets heard a lot. So if I'm going to compose a piece of music for a scripted drama and it's kind of drone-like and it runs for 2 minutes behind and it gets used once and it's probably fairly not memorable, which is actually the point of the whole cue, is to not be memorable because you want the dialogue to be taking precedent and all that. But no, I want to create. There's this guy Charles Fox, and he wrote the Wide World of Sports theme, and he also wrote the Monday Night Football theme. You know, and then he went and he wrote, you know, like the Happy Days theme, and he wrote the Laverne and Shirley theme. And it's like, these are things that people know. You know, dun 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 dun. That would be great to be able to write that piece of music. You know, so that's, I think, one thing that the world of production music really has to its benefit is that you can write a piece of music that actually, when people hear it, it's like, oh, I know what that is. You know, as opposed to like, okay, there's the 3-minute chase scene with the big percussion and you know, do we really know what that is? So, and neither one is valuable or not valuable, or is more valuable than the other. But I do think that there seems to be a hierarchy that the big blockbuster Men in Tights movie is the be all and the end all. And you know, I would love the opportunity to write a theme that gets played as much as the Fox Sports theme, or the CBS football theme, or the NBC football theme. Any of those. That would be just like, to me, like, that's awesome. So, anyway.
I agree. Michael Lord, michaellord.com. Coolest dude I know. One of them for sure. Man, thank you so much for hopping on here.
Well, and also, hey, congratulations on all the CrimeSonics stuff.
Hey, man, thanks. We're slaving away, dude. Slaving away. All right, brother, I appreciate you so much, and we are out of here.